What secrets does the Vatican hide behind its locked doors? Endless shelves filled with ancient manuscripts, forbidden gospels, and relics that could change history are waiting, though few will ever see them. Tonight, we journey through the world of knowledge so closely guarded, even scholars are turned away. Lost texts that challenge the very foundations of faith, letters between popes and kings that shaped empires, myths of giants, watchers, and ancient civilizations, all resting in silence for centuries. Each room holds a story, each scroll a truth too dangerous to reveal. Join me as we unlock the mysteries of the Vatican's forbidden archives, step by step, page by page. Every discovery pulls us deeper into secrets kept from the public eye, where history, power, and faith collide. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mysteries of Earth, and stay with me until the very end, because what lies hidden might change the way you see the world forever. Beneath the quiet streets of Rome, behind walls that have witnessed centuries of history, lies a world few have seen and even fewer may ever enter. The Vatican, already a symbol of spiritual authority, holds within its walls a secret far older and perhaps more formidable than any palace or cathedral. For over 1,000 years, popes, scholars, and scribes have worked tirelessly to gather, protect, and conceal knowledge, texts, letters, decrees, and artifacts that form one of the most comprehensive repositories of human history ever assembled. The story begins in the early centuries of the Church, when Rome became the center of a growing spiritual empire. Documents of immense importance arrive from all corners of the known world: letters from emperors, treaties between kings, philosophical manuscripts from Greece and Egypt, and maps charting lands scarcely imagined by European eyes. To possess these records was to wield power. The Church recognized that knowledge itself could shape thought, influence rulers, and guide nations. Thus, the decision was made. These treasures would be safeguarded behind walls, sometimes in secrecy, sometimes in plain sight. As centuries passed, the archive grew, room by room, corridor by corridor. Candlelight illuminated endless shelves where the parchment of history whispered silently. Each pope added his touch, collecting and cataloguing texts that might otherwise be lost to fire, war, or neglect. What began as a modest collection of papal letters evolved into a vault of civilization itself, a mirror reflecting not only religious thought, but the ambitions, discoveries, and curiosities of humanity across eras. Yet this was not a neutral endeavor. Preservation was intertwined with control. Knowledge could be dangerous, capable of inspiring doubt, revolution, or dissent. Some texts were hidden, others restricted, their words sealed from all but a select few. In doing so, the Vatican shaped not only what would survive, but also what the world would come to believe. Each wall of the archive became a threshold between the known and the forbidden, between history's open pages and the silence of secrets never to be read. Even today, these walls exude a quiet authority. They guard manuscripts that predate modern science, letters that could rewrite our understanding of power, and texts whose contents remain tantalizingly out of reach. Scholars speak of the archives as a labyrinth of memory, a place where time itself seems to pause, waiting for those who might glimpse the hidden threads of human history. To enter is to step into 1,000 years of intellect, devotion, and discretion, where every scroll carries the weight of lives lived and decisions made in shadows. The Vatican's archives remind us that knowledge is both fragile and formidable. They are a testament to humanity's desire to preserve its story, even when that story must be hidden. Behind these walls, the past is not only remembered, it is guarded, curated, and sometimes silenced. And as we begin our journey into the depths of this extraordinary place, we are reminded that the secrets it holds are more than ink on parchment. They are echoes of human ambition, curiosity, and the enduring power of knowledge itself. Hidden behind unassuming doors in the heart of Vatican City lie rooms so restricted that few eyes have ever glimpsed their contents. These are the corridors of silence, the restricted halls of the Vatican Archives, where knowledge centuries old rests under layers of secrecy. To step into these chambers is not simply to enter a library. It is to cross a threshold into a world where history itself is tightly controlled, catalogued, and guarded with a vigilance rivaling any fortress. Access is extraordinarily limited. Only a select group of scholars, approved by the Vatican, may enter. Each visitor must navigate a labyrinth of permissions, credentials, and careful supervision. Even then, their movements are closely monitored, their hands guided over the documents under the watchful eyes of archivists who themselves have spent decades tending to this fragile memory of humanity. Here, every gesture matters. A misplaced page or a careless breath could damage a text older than most nations. Within these restricted rooms lie treasures of unimaginable value: papal letters that shaped empires, treaties that altered the course of wars, and scrolls that preserve the lost knowledge of ancient civilizations. Some documents are sealed with wax and time, their contents deemed too sensitive, too volatile, or too controversial to reveal. Others are bound in delicate parchment, preserved meticulously to survive centuries, yet hidden from public scrutiny. For every text seen, countless more remain untouched, a silent testament to decisions made by centuries of popes about what should be known and what should remain hidden. The atmosphere is heavy with reverence. Rows upon rows of shelves stretch into darkness, each shelf a guardian of human memory. The air carries the faint scent of ink, dust, and history itself. Some scholars describe the archive as alive, its silence almost palpable as of the walls themselves are aware of the secrets they contain. Every scroll is a whisper from the past, every manuscript a voice that has endured despite centuries of concealment. Yet these restrictions are not mere tradition. They are deliberate acts of preservation and control. Knowledge in these rooms has always been both powerful and dangerous. A misinterpreted letter, a forbidden idea, or a controversial account could challenge authority, disrupt faith, or spark upheaval. By limiting access, the Vatican has ensured that the archives are not only preserved physically, but also safeguarded in the narrative they allow the world to see. To imagine standing in these rooms is to imagine holding history in your hands and feeling the weight of centuries pressing quietly upon you. Each sealed document, each restricted shelf, is a reminder that some knowledge is not lost, but deliberately withheld. The mysteries of the Vatican's archives continue to tantalize historians, writers, and dreamers alike. Behind these walls, history is curated, hidden, and sometimes rewritten, not out of malice, but out of an enduring desire to protect what was and control what will be. In the secret archive, the past is both alive and silent. It waits for those few who are permitted to see, to study, and to understand, while the rest of the world can only imagine what truths lie beyond those locked doors. The story of these rooms is a story of restraint, reverence, and the enduring power of secrets. Long before the first pope walked the halls of the Vatican, before the Church claimed dominion over spiritual life in Rome, the seeds of human knowledge had already been sown across civilizations, and some of these seeds, fragile yet indelible, found their way into what would become the Vatican Archives. Among its countless shelves lie manuscripts older than Christianity itself, texts that predate the Gospels, predating even the rise of the Roman Empire. These are the whispers of forgotten worlds, preserved through millennia, hidden behind locks and doors that few have ever opened. Why would such ancient texts reside within a Christian stronghold? The answer lies in the Church's early ambition. Knowledge is power, and understanding the past can shape the present. As Rome absorbed the territories of the Mediterranean, the Church inherited libraries, scrolls, and codices from Egypt, Greece, Mesopotamia, and beyond. Sacred hymns, philosophical treatises, medical writings, and cosmological observations, all of these arrived as gifts, spoils, or deliberate acquisitions. To the Church, these texts were not merely curiosities, they were fragments of human history that could illuminate the foundations of faith, law, and civilization. Yet not all texts were welcomed with open arms. Many contained ideas considered dangerous, heretical, or simply too foreign to align with emerging doctrine. Some described deities unfamiliar to Judeo-Christian tradition, cosmologies that contradicted scripture, or rituals whose meaning had long been lost. The decision was made. They would be preserved, yes, but carefully contained. Locked away in climate-controlled chambers, wrapped in protective coverings, these manuscripts were both a treasure and a risk. The secrecy surrounding these pre-Christian texts has fueled centuries of speculation. What exactly do they contain? Some scholars whisper of Baepes, Babylonian astronomical charts, detailed Egyptian wisdom literature, or Greek philosophical works that challenge the Church's monopoly on moral and spiritual authority. Others suggest that fragments of Sumerian and Assyrian epics, detailing the origins of humanity and the cosmos, also rest quietly on the shelves. Each scroll carries knowledge that, if released too freely, could shift perceptions of history, faith, and human understanding. The care given to these manuscripts is meticulous. Climate, light, and handling are regulated with precision. Even the most qualified scholars must abide by strict protocols to access them. In the silence of these chambers, one can almost sense the weight of centuries pressing down. A reminder that these texts have survived empires, wars, and the erosion of time itself. They are living evidence of civilizations that have vanished, ideas that have been lost to ordinary memory, and questions that humanity has wrestled with for millennia. To gaze upon a pre-Christian manuscript in the Vatican is to confront the very roots of human thought. It is to feel the presence of minds long gone, whispering their truths across the ages, and yet most of the world will never see them. These locked texts are reminders that history is curated as much as it is written, that knowledge can be preserved and yet remain invisible, and that the past often sleeps in silence, waiting for those deemed worthy to awaken it. Within the Vatican's hidden chambers, the oldest stories of humanity lie in shadow. They are silent witnesses to a world before Christ, preserved by those who understood that even the most ancient knowledge carries power, power worth guarding, even in secrecy. Long before the Bible became the universally recognized scripture, Christianity was a faith in formation, a movement brimming with diversity of thought, belief, and storytelling. Across the Mediterranean, communities recorded the life of Jesus, his teachings, and the experiences of his followers. Yet no single voice could claim authority. Amid this diversity, a question emerged. Which books would shape the faith, and which would be silenced forever? The answer came not only from theology, but from politics. As the Church sought to unify an ever-expanding flock, debates erupted over texts that conveyed ideas considered too radical, too obscure, or simply at odds with the emerging orthodoxy. Councils were convened, gatherings of bishops and scholars who held the delicate task of drawing boundaries around belief. The outcome of these deliberations would determine the canon, the official collection of sacred texts, but also mark the fate of countless other writings. Among the rejected works were the books now known as the Apocrypha, alongside forgotten Gospels and letters that offered alternative perspectives on Jesus, his disciples, and the early Christian community. Some contained visions of heaven and hell, mystical dialogues between divine beings, or teachings that challenged established hierarchies. Others recounted stories of Jesus' childhood, or hinted at secret knowledge passed to select followers. To some, these texts were dangerous, capable of inspiring doubt, confusion, or rebellion against the authority of church leaders. Politics played as much a role as piety. Regional power struggles, doctrinal disagreements, and the need for unity in a world of competing empires all influenced which texts were accepted and which were condemned. A gospel revered in Alexandria might be rejected in Rome. A prophetic letter cherished in Antioch could vanish from memory the church. As decisions were as much about consolidating authority as about guiding faith. To choose one set of texts over another was to define the very narrative of Christianity, shaping how generations would understand salvation, morality, and the divine. Rejection, however, did not always mean destruction. Many of these texts were preserved, tucked away in monasteries, libraries, and eventually the Vatican Archives. They were hidden, sometimes intentionally, sometimes through neglect, their existence whispered about by scholars and seekers. Their stories, once suppressed, took on a mythical quality. The silence surrounding them became part of their power, a reminder that the history of belief is not only what is celebrated, but also what is silenced. To imagine holding one of these censored texts is to confront a world of possibilities. What might Christianity have become if these books had survived in circulation? How would they have changed the understanding of Jesus' message, the role of disciples, or the nature of faith itself? The Vatican Archives, in preserving these works, maintain a fragile bridge to the past, a record of both what was embraced and what was forbidden. The censored books of the early Church remind us that history is not a single story, but a tapestry woven from voices both heard and hushed. The choices made in those early councils echo across centuries, influencing theology, culture, and belief. And as we peer into the Vatican's archives, we glimpse the suppressed chapters of a faith in formation, texts that survived against odds, waiting for curious eyes to rediscover the full richness of a world that once teemed with possibility. Throughout history, knowledge has never been neutral. Ideas carry power, the power to inspire, to challenge, to disrupt. In the halls of the Vatican and across Christendom, this power was recognized early and sometimes feared. Texts, discoveries, and even questions could become dangerous. To confront them was to challenge authority, to destabilize belief, and in some cases, to risk one's life. In the early centuries of the Church, heresy was not simply an abstract accusation. It was a tool to define orthodoxy, to draw lines around acceptable thought. Books that diverged from sanctioned doctrine were censored. Scrolls with alternative visions of Christ, writings that questioned creation or authority, and works that explored philosophies outside Judeo-Christian teaching were often banned or destroyed. Some were burned in dramatic public spectacles, flames consuming words deemed too potent for ordinary minds. Others were quietly locked away, their existence erased from memory. The reasons were as varied as the texts themselves. Certain works carried theological contradictions. Others contained moral teachings or mystical visions that threatened to fragment the unity of belief. In an era where church and state were often intertwined, an idea could ripple outward, influencing rulers, laws, and society. Knowledge, once freed, was not easily contained. To prevent unrest or doctrinal confusion, the Church sometimes chose the most extreme measure: silence. This danger extended beyond theology. Science, philosophy, and art were all subject to scrutiny. When Galileo declared that the earth revolved around the sun, the Church reacted not merely to the science, but to the implications. Authority could be questioned, scripture reinterpreted, and centuries of taught truth challenged. Composers, artists, and writers learned to navigate invisible boundaries. One misstep could result in censure or worse. Censorship was a complex weapon. Some texts were publicly banned and indexed, as with the infamous Index Librorum Prohibitorum, a catalogue of works deemed forbidden to Catholics. Others were hidden quietly, their removal imperceptible, their knowledge preserved, but inaccessible. This duality, protection and control, characterized much of the Vatican's approach. Preservation did not imply consent. It implied caution. The Church was building a fortress of knowledge, one in which dangerous ideas could survive without threatening authority. The consequences of banning knowledge were profound. Some ideas were delayed for centuries, rediscovered only when the Church or society was ready to face them. Others were lost forever, their authors silenced, and their works consigned to obscurity. And yet, the very act of suppression often amplified the allure of these ideas. Forbidden texts, dangerous philosophies, and censored discoveries became objects of fascination, whispered about in secret, shared cautiously among scholars and seekers. To enter the Vatican's restricted chambers is to feel the weight of this tension, the duality of knowledge as both treasure and threat. Each shelf, Each sealed scroll embodies centuries of judgment, what was too dangerous to believe and what was too powerful to destroy. These walls remind us that history is shaped not only by what is preserved, but also by what is silenced. In the interplay between knowledge and danger, we see the enduring human struggle to understand, control, and protect the ideas that define our world. In the shadowed corridors of history, few institutions have inspired as much fear and fascination as the Inquisition. Known for its relentless pursuit of heresy, the Inquisition was more than a tribunal of punishment. It was a meticulous chronicler of human belief, desire, and dissent. And while the flames and public trials captured the imagination of the world, the real story often lies in silence. The hidden transcripts, confessions, and suppressed testimonies that the Vatican has preserved for centuries. Behind heavy doors and within guarded vaults, countless trial records rest in near-total darkness. They tell stories not of victories or grandiose spectacles, but of ordinary men and women confronted with extraordinary power. These documents are at once intimate and chilling. Confessions written under duress, letters questioning authority, and interrogations that reveal the fears and doubts of people navigating a world of rigid dogma. Every word carries weight, each line a testament to the tension between faith and freedom. The Inquisition was thorough, leaving little to chance. Trials were documented meticulously, often by scribes who recorded every answer, hesitation, and misstep. Some documents detail theological debates, others recount accusations of witchcraft, heretical readings, or clandestine practices. What seems mundane, a simple question or an offhand remark, could become evidence of heresy, condemned and preserved for future scrutiny. In these pages, one witnesses the machinery of control and the fragility of human belief. Yet not all records were meant to see the light of day. Many testimonies were sealed, removed from public archives, or stored deep within the Vatican's restricted rooms. The Church understood the power of knowledge and the danger of dissent. Even as trials concluded, the stories did not disappear. They were locked away, a silent chronicle of those who dared to question, to seek, or simply to exist outside the narrow path of accepted faith. These hidden records bear witness to a world where obedience was enforced, but curiosity could not be extinguished entirely. The preservation of these documents is as deliberate as the trials themselves. Climate, ink, and parchment were carefully controlled, ensuring that voices from centuries past remain legible and intact. Scholars allowed access to these materials describe a haunting intimacy. One can almost feel the tremor in a condemned voice, the hesitation in a written confession, the courage and fear woven together in each testimony. It is history recorded in ink and suffering, a mirror of the human struggle against authority and fear. The Inquisition's silent records are more than chronicles of punishment. They are archives of humanity itself. They reveal the tension between control and conscience, faith and doubt. They remind us that history is shaped not only by the loud declarations of power, but by the quiet words hidden in darkness. In these sealed pages, the whispers of heresy, courage, and curiosity endure, waiting for those willing to read them carefully and listen closely. To explore these records is to step into a space where silence speaks louder than fire, where the walls themselves seem to hold the breath of centuries, and where the human spirit, though often suppressed, refuses to vanish entirely. Beyond the familiar texts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John lies a hidden world of writings that few have ever seen. These are the lost Gospels, ancient documents preserved for centuries, often whispered about but rarely allowed to reach the light of public scrutiny. Among them are the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Judas, and other texts that offer glimpses into the early diversity of Christian thought. The Gospel of Thomas, for example, is unlike any canonical text. It does not recount miracles or the resurrection, nor does it follow a narrative of birth, death, and ascension. Instead, it preserves the secret sayings of Jesus, short, enigmatic statements, sometimes poetic, often paradoxical. The kingdom is inside you and it is outside you. one passage reads, suggesting a faith that turns inward, emphasizing personal understanding over institutional authority. To the early church, such ideas were dangerous, threatening the hierarchy and control that the growing institution sought to maintain. Equally provocative is the Gospel of Mary. In these pages, Mary Magdalene is more than a devoted follower. She is a teacher, a visionary, a bearer of secret wisdom. Her voice challenges the patriarchal norms of the time, offering guidance to disciples and insights into the nature of the soul and the divine. The Church, wary of elevating a female perspective in such a formative period, relegated her teachings to obscurity, ensuring that her gospel would not influence the majority of believers. Then there is the Gospel of Judas, a text that turns conventional narratives on their head. Judas Iscariot, long vilified as a betrayer, is here cast in a different light, a chosen participant in a divine plan, acting as a necessary instrument in the story of salvation. The implications were radical, reshaping morality, loyalty, and the very meaning of betrayal. And its suppression, like the others, was not an accident. It was deliberate, a measure to preserve a single sanctioned narrative. These lost Gospels reveal a Christianity far more diverse and complex than the official canon suggests. They are documents of thought, debate, and faith, preserved carefully in monasteries, private collections, and the Vatican Archives. Many were written in Coptic, Greek, or Aramaic, copied by hand by scribes who understood the fragility of these works and the risks of exposure. For centuries, they remained hidden, their ideas suppressed, but not destroyed, waiting for the modern age to rediscover them. The rediscovery of texts like those in the Nag Hammadi Library in 1945 brought these voices back to light, offering scholars, theologians, and seekers a new window into the spiritual landscape of early Christianity. They challenge assumptions, provoke questions, and illuminate the paths not taken. To step into these lost Gospels is to confront a world where faith was not monolithic, where voices once silenced still speak with clarity, daring readers to question, to reflect, and to imagine a Christianity richer, more mysterious, and far less certain than history often portrays. Beneath the grandeur of St. Peter's Basilica, where sunlight glints off gilded mosaics and pilgrims fill the marble nave, lies a world largely hidden from public view. Beneath the towering columns and sacred art, centuries of history rest quietly, some of it excavated, much of it still restricted. Archaeologists have long sought to uncover what lies beneath the Vatican, but access has always been tightly controlled, revealing tantalizing glimpses while leaving many questions unanswered. The first major excavations began in the mid-20th century, aiming to uncover the tombs of early popes and the legendary burial site of St. Peter himself. Layers of history were peeled back, ancient Roman streets, mausoleums, and crypts filled with skeletal remains and artifacts. Each find offered a connection to the past, a physical link to the earliest days of Christianity. Yet even as discoveries were made, much of the subterranean world remained off-limits. Certain chambers, sealed doors, and ancient passageways were considered too sacred or too mysterious for modern eyes. Among the most remarkable finds were inscriptions and mosaics that predated the current basilica. Early Christian symbols, paintings of saints, and relics of funerary practices revealed the vibrant life of Rome's hidden religious communities. Archaeologists noted evidence of structures older than the basilica itself, suggesting that this site had long been revered, long before Constantine commissioned the grand church we know today. Each layer of soil told a story of devotion, of power, of lives once lived in the shadows of history. Yet alongside these legitimate archaeological treasures, whispers of restricted areas fueled speculation. Certain rooms covered over or walled off were never fully excavated. Some scholars believe that these chambers may contain documents, relics, or tombs of figures whose significance the church deemed sensitive. Other theories suggest hidden artifacts connected to early Christianity or even pre-Christian Rome, objects or writings that might alter our understanding of history. While no definitive proof exists, The mere suggestion of off-limits spaces has inspired generations of researchers, historians, and conspiracy theorists alike. Even in the accessible areas, the discoveries under St. Peter's remind us of the Vatican's role not only as a religious center, but as a keeper of history. The careful preservation of human remains, inscriptions, and sacred objects demonstrates a conscious effort to protect the past, even when knowledge is restricted. Every blocked passage, every sealed chamber, is a reminder of what we may never fully know, a testament to the enduring tension between revelation and secrecy. To walk beneath the basilica is to step into layers of time, to feel the weight of centuries pressing from below. It is a place where faith, history, and mystery intersect, a space that holds both truths revealed and truths deliberately hidden. And as archaeologists uncover fragments of this world, the question remains, what sleeps in the chambers we may never enter? The secrets buried under St. Peter's Basilica are a reminder that history is never complete. Some stories emerge, while others remain locked beneath stone and silence, waiting for a day when perhaps they may finally speak. The story of early Christianity is far more complex than the neat narrative preserved in canonical texts. Beneath the surface of what became mainstream belief, a tapestry of rival groups, alternative interpretations, and forgotten doctrines thrived. The faith we know today emerged from centuries of debate, divergence, and daring exploration of spiritual ideas, many of which were ultimately silenced, hidden, or erased from history. In the first centuries, CE, Christianity was not a single monolith, but a diverse and often contentious movement. Communities interpreted the teachings of Jesus in radically different ways. Some emphasized the mystical and spiritual, seeking secret knowledge about the nature of the soul and the cosmos. Others focused on ethical living or the imminent arrival of God's kingdom. Each group had its texts, its leaders, and its interpretations, creating a rich and varied religious landscape that rarely survives in modern memory. Rival factions often wrote their own gospels, letters, and treatises. The Ebionites, for instance, saw Jesus as a human prophet and adhered strictly to Jewish law. The Gnostics explored dualities of spirit and matter, proposing elaborate cosmologies of hidden realms and divine emissaries. Some sects believed salvation came through secret knowledge, not faith alone. Their writings, apocryphal gospels, mystical texts, and allegorical teachings offered perspectives that challenged the emerging orthodoxy, giving voice to ideas both fascinating and controversial. The institutional church, rising in power during the 2nd and 3rd centuries, began the deliberate work of defining orthodoxy. Councils were convened, texts were examined, and decisions were made about what would be included in the canonical Bible. Those teachings that deviated from the chosen path were labeled heretical, their authors branded as threats to unity and their writings suppressed. What survived was not always the truth of early Christian thought, but the version that maintained cohesion, authority, and control. Archaeological and textual discoveries in modern times, such as the Nag Hammadi Library, reveal the depth of this hidden history. Lost Gospels, letters, and philosophical treatises expose a Christianity rich with metaphor, mysticism, and daring theological imagination. We now see that early believers wrestled with questions that resonate today: the nature of God, the purpose of suffering, the role of women in the faith, and the possibility of secret knowledge. These were not marginal curiosities. They were central to the lived experience of countless communities. Exploring the hidden face of early Christianity allows us to glimpse a world that official histories tried to erase. It is a story of creativity, courage, and conflict, a reminder that religious belief is never static. Each suppressed text, each silenced group, is a window into the complexity of faith and the human desire to understand the divine. The early church was as much about ideas as it was about rituals, and many of those ideas remain buried in archives, waiting to be read, interpreted, and understood. In unearthing them, we confront a Christianity that is not singular, but vibrant, contested, and astonishingly diverse. A hidden face that challenges what we thought we knew, and invites us to reimagine the origins of one of the world's most influential religions. Long before the foundations of the Christian Church were laid, humanity had already begun recording its understanding of the world. Civilizations across Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, and the Indus Valley left behind texts, tablets, and scrolls, records of science, philosophy, religion, and invention. Many of these fragile artifacts found their way into the Vatican Archives, preserved under lock and key, accessible only to a select few. Their existence hints at a lineage of knowledge older and more complex than the familiar histories we are taught. The Vatican's interest in these pre-Christian records was both practical and strategic. Knowledge was power, and the Church, rising in influence, recognized the value of ancient wisdom. Astronomical observations, mathematical treatises, medical texts, and philosophical discourses, all were carefully collected. Some were copied by monks under flickering candlelight, translating cuneiform, hieroglyphs, and Greek, preserving ideas that might otherwise have been lost to time. These texts offered not only historical insight, but practical information, methods of construction, navigation, and natural science that had shaped early civilizations. Yet much of this knowledge was hidden from public view. To the Church, certain ideas carried risks. Some writings suggested theological frameworks incompatible with Christian doctrine. Others contained philosophical reasoning that could challenge authority or encourage independent thought. In the hands of the faithful, such texts might inspire curiosity, debate, or even dissent. By restricting access, the Vatican both preserved and controlled the flow of knowledge, creating a repository that was as much about secrecy as it was about conservation. Among the treasures believed to reside in the archives are Babylonian astronomical records, Egyptian papyri detailing rituals and medicine, and Greek manuscripts exploring mathematics and metaphysics. These documents speak of civilizations with astonishing sophistication, advanced understanding of the heavens, detailed maps of lands long forgotten, and insights into human behavior and governance. Some scholars suggest that hidden within these texts could be clues to technologies, philosophies, or scientific methods that predate what modern science claims to have discovered. The very idea that such knowledge exists within a single, highly restricted institution has fueled speculation for centuries. Were these texts simply preserved for posterity, or were they intentionally withheld to shape how history and faith were understood? Each sealed scroll, each locked volume, represents a choice. What the Church deemed safe to reveal, and what was too powerful or dangerous for public consumption. Exploring forbidden knowledge from the ancient world reminds us that history is never neutral. What survives and what is hidden shapes our perception of human progress, belief, and ingenuity. The Vatican Archives stand as a bridge to a distant past, a place where the accomplishments, ideas, and mysteries of civilizations older than Christianity are preserved, sometimes silently, awaiting those patient enough and brave enough to uncover them. To step into these records is to witness the extraordinary continuity of human curiosity. Centuries apart, civilizations reached for understanding, leaving clues that may still challenge, inspire, and transform how we see the world today. In the grand halls of the Vatican, among towering shelves of forgotten texts, lie documents that reveal a story far more complex than the popular account of Galileo Galilei's trial. Known widely as the man condemned for teaching that the earth revolves around the sun, the real trial papers expose layers of political tension, personal rivalries, and institutional caution that shaped one of history's most famous conflicts between science and faith. Galileo's writings, meticulously preserved in the archives, show that the Church did not act blindly against him. The documents include transcripts of his dialogues, letters to influential cardinals, and internal correspondence between theologians and advisors. They reveal a Church deeply concerned not with suppressing truth outright, but with controlling the pace and manner of its dissemination. Copernican astronomy, radical in its implications, threatened established interpretations of Scripture and risked destabilizing the careful theological order the Church maintained. The trial papers exposed the nuanced accusations brought against Galileo. He was charged not merely with heresy, but with disobedience, defying direct instructions from the Vatican to avoid asserting heliocentric theory as fact. The documents show repeated attempts to negotiate, to present his discoveries in ways that might be acceptable to church authorities. Yet tensions ran high. Political factions within Rome, wary of losing influence or prestige, pushed for a decisive condemnation. The archives hold letters detailing these debates, the fear that new scientific ideas could embolden dissenters, challenge papal authority, or spark wider social unrest. Reading Galileo's personal defense within these papers is a revelation. He appealed to reason, scripture, and observation, arguing that the natural world, like faith, was a reflection of divine order. Yet the trial transcripts make it clear that his scientific arguments were secondary to the Church's broader concern with control. The condemnation was as much about maintaining hierarchy and public perception as it was about astronomy. The trial papers also shed light on the aftermath, the conditions of his house arrest, the continued correspondence with supporters, and the meticulous surveillance of his writings. Contrary to the popular myth of absolute suppression, the documents reveal that Galileo remained intellectually active, his ideas circulating quietly, copied by sympathetic scholars across Europe. His work endured not despite the Church's judgment, but alongside it, quietly shaping the scientific revolution. These preserved papers offer a vivid glimpse into the tension between innovation and authority, knowledge and power. They remind us that history is rarely a simple story of hero versus villain. Instead, it is a web of motives, fears, and choices, each decision echoing across centuries. Galileo's trial, as revealed in the Vatican Archives, is a testament to the human struggle to reconcile curiosity with conformity, observation with doctrine, and truth with the politics of power. To hold these papers is to touch a moment where science, faith, and authority intersected, leaving lessons that continue to resonate today. Few names in history evoke as much awe and mystery as Giordano Bruno, the philosopher, cosmologist, and maverick thinker who dared to challenge the Church with ideas centuries ahead of his time. Burned at the stake in 1600 for heresy, Bruno's legacy is shrouded in both legend and silence. But buried deep within the Vatican Archives lie documents that reveal far more than public accounts ever have. Many of these records remain classified, and their secrecy continues to fuel speculation about what the Church truly feared. The surviving fragments of Bruno's trial show a man accused of blasphemy, heresy, and the audacity of independent thought. Yet scholars who have glimpsed the classified portions suggest the accusations went far beyond doctrinal disagreement. The documents likely include his private debates with inquisitors, detailed transcripts of theological arguments, and confidential letters exchanged between cardinals. These papers could illuminate how Bruno's ideas about the infinity of the universe, multiple worlds, and the divinity of nature clashed with church authority, not merely on spiritual grounds, but on political and social ones as well. Why are the full records still restricted? The Vatican has historically cited sensitivity to doctrinal content, historical context, and respect for centuries-old protocols. But many historians argue that the classification may also reflect the radical nature of Bruno's thought. His writings challenged the very framework of human understanding, a universe without a fixed center, stars as distant suns, and the divine present in all existence. Revealing the complete trial records could expose uncomfortable truths about the Church's efforts to suppress revolutionary ideas, not just in Bruno's time, but across the centuries. The restricted documents likely reveal a meticulous process of interrogation, negotiation, and manipulation, designed to force compliance while maintaining the Church's public image. They might detail how certain texts and dialogues were suppressed, how witnesses were coached, and how fear was wielded as a tool of control. The few surviving accounts hint at a mind that remained unbroken until the very end, a man whose courage and intellect have inspired generations. Bruno's case is a stark reminder of the tension between knowledge and authority. The classified documents are more than historical records. They are a symbol of the lengths to which institutions will go to manage ideas they perceive as dangerous. Each sealed page represents questions unanswered, debates silenced, and truths deferred. To imagine opening the Bruno files is to glimpse a world where philosophy, science, and faith collided with unmatched intensity. The restricted records, while hidden, continue to echo across time, reminding us that some ideas are so powerful they cannot be forgotten, even when the flames consume their messenger. In preserving these documents, the Vatican has both shielded and immortalized Bruno's legacy. His spirit persists in the whispers of forbidden knowledge, in the imagination of those who dare to wonder. And though the full story may remain locked away, the mystery itself endures, compelling us to question what truths lie just beyond the reach of history. In the barren cliffs near Qumran, hidden in caves for nearly 2 millennia, lay one of history's most astonishing archaeological finds, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Discovered in 1947, these fragile manuscripts, written on parchment and papyrus, in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, would forever alter our understanding of early Judaism and the roots of Christianity. Yet even decades later, their meaning remains contested, and the secrets they contain continue to stir debate among scholars and theologians alike. The scrolls comprise fragments of every book of the Hebrew Bible except Esther, alongside apocryphal texts, sectarian rules, and mystical writings. Their discovery was like opening a window to the religious, social, and political world of the Second Temple period. Among these ancient words are the voices of communities who lived at the margins, devoted to strict religious observance, yet often isolated, awaiting a promised transformation of the world. For historians, the scrolls confirm that the textual tradition of the Bible was far more fluid than previously imagined, revealing variants and interpretations that challenged centuries of assumed uniformity. But it is not just what the scrolls contain that fascinates. It is what remains hidden, disputed, or misunderstood. Early publication delays, fragmentary conditions, and scholarly debates have left room for interpretation, controversy, and speculation. Some scholars suggest that the scrolls hint at alternative messianic expectations, sectarian practices, and interpretations of law that differ from the canonical Bible. Others see warnings, prophecies, or coded messages intended for a select few, echoing the same sense of secrecy that defined the Vatican's archives. The scrolls also illuminate the tension between discovery and control. Initial access was tightly restricted, with only a small group of scholars allowed to examine the fragile documents. This exclusivity fueled suspicion, conspiracy theories, and the perception that powerful institutions were hiding or delaying the release of transformative knowledge. As more texts were eventually published, new questions arose. Were their scrolls never revealed? Could missing fragments contain revelations that alter our understanding of early religious communities? The uncertainty keeps the story alive, bridging the gap between fact and speculation. Perhaps the most haunting mystery lies in the interplay between history and interpretation. Each fragment, each faded line of text, is a whisper from the past, yet its full voice remains elusive. Some readings suggest radical departures from established narratives. Others reinforce familiar themes of faith, law, and devotion. The Dead Sea Scrolls, like the Vatican Archives, embody the paradox of preservation. Knowledge saved, yet partially veiled, leaving us to wonder what truths lie just beyond reach. To gaze upon these ancient manuscripts is to touch history itself, to feel the weight of human belief carried across centuries, and to realize that even in fragments, the past continues to speak. The mysteries of the Dead Sea Scrolls are not confined to words. They live in the questions they provoke, the debates they inspire, and the truths they have yet to fully reveal. In December of 1945, in the remote deserts of Upper Egypt near the town of Nag Hammadi, a discovery quietly reshaped the way we understand the early centuries of Christianity. Hidden in a clay jar, sealed for almost 16 centuries, were 13 leather-bound codices containing more than 50 ancient texts, works that had been suppressed, forgotten, or deliberately excluded from the canonical Bible. These manuscripts would come to be known as the Nag Hammadi Library, and their contents challenged assumptions about faith, authority, and the diversity of early Christian thought. The texts include Gospels, letters, and philosophical treatises, many written in Coptic, the language of Egyptian Christians. Among them are the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and the Gospel of Truth, each offering a perspective on Jesus, his teachings, and the spiritual world that diverge sharply from orthodox scripture. Unlike the four canonical Gospels, some of these writings emphasize personal knowledge, introspection, and direct experience of the divine, placing the seeker at the center of faith rather than institutional authority. In these words, divinity is not only found in heaven or within church walls, it is accessible, intimate, and immediate. For centuries, the Church had sought to define a single, unified narrative of Christianity. Competing interpretations, like those preserved at Nag Hammadi, were considered dangerous. They threatened the consolidation of power and the uniformity of belief. Some texts describe secret teachings delivered to select disciples. Others contain esoteric visions of creation, angels, and the nature of the soul. They reveal a vibrant and diverse spiritual landscape, one where questions were encouraged and answers were manifold rather than fixed. The discovery of these codices forced scholars to reconsider what was lost and what was deliberately hidden. How many alternative gospels, letters, and teachings were destroyed or locked away in archives like the Vatican? How different might the story of early Christianity appear if these voices had been heard for centuries rather than whispered only in clandestine circles? Nag Hammadi offers a glimpse of a faith that was far more complex, experimental, and human than the official texts alone suggest. Yet even today, debate surrounds the interpretation of these manuscripts. Some argue that they represent a heretical fringe. Others contend they illuminate the richness of early Christian thought, providing a window into communities and ideas that would otherwise vanish from history. Every line, every fragment challenges our understanding of orthodoxy, authority, and belief, reminding us that history is not simply what survives. It is also what was suppressed, ignored, or deliberately concealed. The Nag Hammadi Library stands as a testament to the resilience of ideas. Hidden for centuries, these texts survived the sweep of time, political intrigue, and religious censorship. They continue to provoke questions. What other teachings were lost? What alternative histories remain buried? And how might the human story have shifted if such knowledge had been embraced rather than suppressed? To hold even a fragment of Nag Hammadi in one's mind is to step into a shadowed corner of history, where the voice of curiosity triumphs over silence. These books did not merely survive. They challenge, inspire, and remind us that even in secrecy, the pursuit of knowledge persists, waiting for those who dare to seek it. History, as we know it, is often a carefully curated narrative. But what of the stories that never reached us? The Vatican Archives, vast and meticulous, contain not only preserved treasures but also mysterious absences, documents that vanished without explanation, manuscripts that were never returned, pages deliberately excised. These missing pieces haunt historians and scholars, prompting questions that echo through centuries. What was lost? Why was it removed? And what truths were deemed too dangerous for human eyes? The phenomenon is not merely the result of decay or accident. Across the centuries, fires, floods, and neglect did claim some texts, but deliberate concealment appears far more frequent. Some manuscripts simply disappear from the record. Letters from kings and popes vanish, theological treatises cited in other works are nowhere to be found, and personal diaries of influential clergy evaporate into silence. Scholars speculate that these gaps were intentional, designed to control history itself. If knowledge equates to power, then the removal of documents becomes an act of shaping reality. Consider the early church. Debates raged over doctrine, authority, and the nature of salvation. Texts that supported alternative interpretations, questioned papal authority, or revealed controversial practices often vanished. The Apocrypha, heretical Gospels, and writings critical of the Church's policies, some survive only in fragments, references, or copies, while others appear to have been lost entirely. In many cases, the absence of a document is more intriguing than the document itself. Silence becomes a story, hinting at what those in power feared most. Even modern discoveries raise more questions than answers. Scholars occasionally uncover previously unknown texts, only to find gaps or missing pages that seem deliberately removed. A letter might reference a treaty, yet the treaty itself has never been located. A philosophical treatise may be cited in a footnote, but no complete copy exists. These voids act like shadows across history, shaping our understanding even through absence. They hint at knowledge that could rewrite timelines, alter perceptions of power, or reveal secrets of belief long hidden. The missing pages of history also reveal the fragility of human memory. The archival record is a construction, curated over centuries by those who decided what was worth keeping and what should be lost. Each vanished manuscript reminds us that history is not only about what was written, but also about what was deliberately concealed. It is a puzzle with pieces removed, a narrative with chapters erased, and a library with doors that may never be opened. Yet the gaps themselves fuel curiosity. They invite exploration, speculation, and imagination. Every scholar, historian, or seeker who approaches the archives knows that what is absent can be as meaningful as what survives. The missing pages are a testament to both the fragility and resilience of knowledge, proof that even in silence, history speaks. They challenge us to ask not only what we know, but what we will never know, and why. In the end, the vanished documents of the Vatican Archives remind us of a timeless truth. History is never complete, and mystery, like knowledge itself, endures. Beneath the quiet halls of the Vatican Archives lie letters that once decided the fate of empires. Sealed in ink and parchment, hidden from all but a few trusted eyes, these missives are more than mere correspondence. They are the whispers of power, the secret dialogues that shaped the political landscape of Europe and beyond. Kings, emperors, and popes all used these letters to negotiate, deceive, and assert authority, leaving behind a trail of diplomacy hidden from public view for centuries. Imagine a Renaissance pope, quill in hand, drafting a note to a distant king. Every word weighed carefully, each phrase measured to persuade or intimidate. Across Europe, monarchs plotted alliances, warned of rebellion, or requested aid, all through the delicate channels of hidden communication. These letters reveal the intricate dance of politics, where a single misinterpreted phrase could spark war or save a kingdom from ruin. The Vatican, as both spiritual and temporal power, was uniquely positioned to intercept and archive these exchanges. Treaties were negotiated in secret, rivalries mediated behind closed doors, and threats conveyed in carefully coded language. Some letters were censored or redacted, revealing the delicate balancing act between secrecy and transparency. Others remain untouched, silent witnesses to decisions that altered the course of history. The hidden correspondence also reflects a human side of power. Letters are filled not only with strategy, but with fear, hope, and persuasion. Some show a ruler begging for mercy. Others reveal desperate attempts to sway a council. Emperors pleaded for favors, popes issued veiled threats, and diplomats crafted messages with layers of nuance designed to protect both the sender and the recipient. Every letter is a window into the minds of those who shaped nations, revealing ambition and vulnerability in equal measure. For historians, these letters are invaluable yet enigmatic. Many remain restricted, their contents unknown, fueling speculation and scholarly debate. Some hint at conspiracies, secret alliances, or decisions that contradict public proclamations. Others illuminate mundane administrative matters, taxes, appointments, or territorial disputes. But even these fragments offer insight into the machinery of power and the Church's central role in international affairs. The secrecy surrounding these documents speaks volumes. By controlling access, the Church maintained influence, preserving knowledge that could either empower or destabilize. The letters exemplify how written words, though silent, wield immense force. They remind us that history is not just what is taught, but also what is hidden, catalogued, and guarded in silence. In the dimly lit rooms of the archives, these letters lie in their boxes, centuries old, yet alive with intention. They are the voices of diplomacy, echoing across time, bearing witness to the delicate interplay of faith, ambition, and human ingenuity. The hidden letters of popes and emperors teach us that power often moves quietly, carried on parchment and ink, shaping kingdoms without ever appearing in public chronicles. Beneath the grand halls of the Vatican, far from the eyes of tourists and scholars alike, lie chambers few have ever glimpsed. These are the hidden vaults where the Church preserves not just books and manuscripts, but relics and objects of astonishing historical significance, artifacts that the public has never been permitted to see. Each item is a fragment of a story, a piece of the past carefully protected, its significance known to only a select few. Imagine opening a cabinet to find a fragment of wood claimed to be from Noah's Ark, or a chalice whispered to have been touched by the earliest saints. Perhaps there is a blade, tarnished by centuries, linked to battles that shaped empires, or an inscription on stone from a civilization long erased from history. These are not mere curiosities. They are tangible connections to events and figures whose shadows stretch across the millennia. The Vatican has always been a guardian of relics. Pilgrims once traveled for years to glimpse objects said to contain divine power. But within these inner vaults, the Church keeps more than objects of devotion. It safeguards items whose meanings could challenge established narratives, or whose existence might provoke questions too complex for public understanding. Here lie artifacts that straddle the boundary between faith and history, sacred and mysterious, proven and rumored. Among these treasures are inscriptions and tablets from ancient civilizations, texts that predate the Church itself. Some record forgotten knowledge of science, art, or philosophy. Others hint at lost technology, ritual practices, or forgotten cultures. Some scholars speculate that certain artifacts might even link biblical stories to civilizations like Sumer, Egypt, or Atlantis. While these remain theories, the very secrecy of the vaults adds a layer of intrigue, suggesting that the Vatican's collection may contain keys to understanding history in ways the public has never imagined. The act of hiding is deliberate. By limiting access, the Church controls both the narrative and the interpretation of these objects. Decisions about which relics are displayed, which manuscripts are studied, and which remain locked away reflect centuries of cautious preservation. Secrecy in this case becomes a form of power, ensuring that knowledge, once revealed, does not disrupt the delicate balance of faith, authority, or scholarship. Yet the vaults are more than a repository of secrets. They are also a testament to human devotion and ingenuity. Every artifact, from the smallest fragment to the most imposing object, carries stories of craftsmanship, culture, and belief. They speak of ancient hands shaping clay, metal, or parchment, and of centuries of caretakers ensuring their survival. To stand before the vaults, even in imagination, is to witness a silent dialogue across time. Each object is a whisper from the past, a relic of a world that existed before ours, and a reminder that history is both preserved and concealed. The vault of unreleased artifacts embodies the tension between revelation and secrecy, curiosity and restraint, a treasure trove that teases the imagination while guarding truths the world may not yet be ready to confront. The Vatican Archives have long fascinated scholars, historians, and researchers, not just for what they contain, but for the questions they do not answer. Beyond the manuscripts, letters, and relics lies a silence that speaks as loudly as any document. In this silence, academics have developed theories about what knowledge may have been withheld from public scrutiny and why. These are not tales of conspiracy. They are reasoned inquiries, grounded in observation, history, and the patterns of preservation and restriction. Historians note that the Church's careful cataloguing and occasional sealing of documents suggest deliberate selection. Certain manuscripts were preserved, others restricted. Why were some letters of popes and emperors never released? Why were entire texts of rival gospels kept away from study? Theories abound, often emerging from comparative research, examining texts that survived elsewhere, noting gaps in correspondence, or observing inconsistencies in recorded events. Each gap raises a question. What was deemed too sensitive, and who decided? Some academic theories focus on the nature of power. Knowledge, after all, has always been influence. Letters, treatises, and theological debates hidden from view could alter the perception of history, of authority, or even of faith itself. Scholars argue that the Church, acting as both spiritual and temporal authority, had every reason to carefully control the release of information. By selectively permitting access, it maintained a narrative that supported doctrinal unity while protecting political stability. Other researchers study the interplay between historical discovery and censorship. The Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the list of prohibited books, provides a lens through which to examine suppression. Texts once condemned, later rehabilitated, show patterns of risk assessment. Works deemed heretical in one era could be tolerated in another. From this, academics infer that the Vatican's archives may contain records reflecting similar judgments, works preserved, yet withheld until proper context or timing allowed. Scholars also highlight the implications for interdisciplinary study. Letters from medieval astronomers, maps from explorers, or theological debates often intersect with broader historical questions, trade routes, political alliances, or social reforms. When documents are inaccessible, research is incomplete, and history becomes a partial record. Academic theories, therefore, aim not to speculate wildly, but to identify the silences and ask how those gaps shaped our understanding. Finally, some academics point to the possibility of internal debate within the Church itself. Not all decisions to withhold were uniform. Councils, committees, and popes may have disagreed over access. By tracing patterns of restricted documents, scholars attempt to reconstruct the reasoning behind suppression. Each theory, grounded in surviving evidence, illuminates not only what might be hidden, but why secrecy was prioritized. The Vatican's silence continues to fuel thoughtful, evidence-based inquiry. For historians, the absence of information is as significant as its presence. Theories about withheld knowledge invite us to consider how history is curated, preserved, and sometimes protected. They remind us that archives are not merely repositories. They are active participants in shaping our understanding of the past. In this way, the Vatican's refusal to address certain questions is not just a matter of secrecy. It is a reflection of history's complexity, a call for careful scholarship, and a challenge to explore what lies behind the quiet doors of its most guarded halls. The Vatican Library is already one of the world's most extensive collections, with tens of thousands of manuscripts, maps, and rare texts. Yet whispers among scholars, historians, and archivists suggest that what is publicly acknowledged may only be a fraction of what truly exists. There are hints, gleaned from catalogue discrepancies, anecdotal accounts, and long-standing archival traditions, that the library may be far larger than official records indicate. Researchers who have studied the archives closely note curious anomalies. Certain catalogue entries reference manuscripts whose current locations are unverified. Boxes and ledgers occasionally appear without documentation or with descriptions too vague to confirm their contents. In other instances, letters from popes and curators suggest the existence of rooms that are never mentioned in modern floor plans. These observations have fueled the theory that there are unlisted rooms, chambers intentionally excluded from official records, holding collections the public, and even most scholars, cannot access. Historically, secrecy in the Vatican served multiple purposes. Beyond safeguarding rare texts from damage or theft, restricted areas allowed the Church to control sensitive material, documents that could influence political power, reveal internal debates, or expose theological controversies. A manuscript preserved in a hidden room could survive centuries, yet remain invisible to most researchers. Scholars suggest that the very act of omitting rooms or collections from catalogues was a deliberate strategy, a way to ensure that knowledge could be kept both safe and selective. Experts point to accounts from 16th and 17th century curators who often wrote of special chambers containing papal letters, theological debates, or texts acquired from explorers and foreign courts. Many of these writings describe extraordinary artifacts, maps of uncharted lands, rare copies of pre-Christian texts, and documents of legal or diplomatic significance that were never integrated into public or accessible inventories. Today, some researchers argue that these rooms may still exist, carefully maintained and guarded, with their contents recorded only in internal registers. Even within the publicly known areas of the Vatican Library, scholars note unusual arrangements, locked cabinets, multi-layered vaults, and restricted access to certain floors. Each restriction adds to the possibility that what we see is merely a surface layer. The notion of hidden collections is not rooted in speculation alone. It aligns with centuries of documented archival practices, emphasizing discretion, selective access, and preservation under secrecy. If these unlisted rooms exist, they represent more than mere storage spaces. They are repositories of human history that have survived wars, revolutions, and the passage of time. They remind us that knowledge is not only preserved but curated, that some truths are maintained quietly, waiting for those with both permission and purpose to discover them. The idea of a library larger than we are told challenges our understanding of history itself. It invites scholars and the curious alike to consider not just what is recorded, but what is intentionally omitted. And in those hidden chambers, behind unmarked doors and unlisted vaults, may lie manuscripts and artifacts that could reshape our understanding of civilization, faith, and human ingenuity. Even today, the Vatican's archives remain one of the most coveted destinations for scholars, historians, and seekers of knowledge. Long after popes and curators built the walls and locked the doors, humanity's fascination with what lies within has only intensified. Each generation returns with new questions, new methods, and new curiosity, drawn by the allure of manuscripts, letters, and relics that have survived centuries of secrecy. The search for hidden knowledge is not merely academic, it is a human impulse. Researchers pore over catalogues, decipher marginalia, and request access to texts that have been sealed for centuries. Some pursue forgotten gospels, others investigate pre-Christian manuscripts, and many examine letters between popes and monarchs that could illuminate the tangled history of power, faith, and influence. Every entry granted, every scroll examined, brings a glimpse of understanding, yet every unanswered request reminds scholars that the archives guard their secrets closely. The Vatican's silence is deliberate. Scholars describe the experience of being inside the archives as walking through a living memory, where every shelf, every cabinet, holds a fragment of human history preserved in quiet vigilance. It is a place where the past does not simply exist. It watches, waiting for comprehension, yet refuses to surrender all at once. Some documents are accessible, others are restricted, and some may never see the light of day. This careful curation reinforces the idea that knowledge itself carries weight, that certain truths must be handled with care, their revelation dependent on timing, context, or readiness. Yet human curiosity is persistent. The unending hunt for truth has led to monumental discoveries beyond the Vatican as well. Ancient libraries, desert caves, and forgotten monasteries have yielded manuscripts long thought lost. Each find, from the Dead Sea Scrolls to the Nag Hammadi codices, strengthens the notion that human history is far richer and more complex than any single institution can reveal. Scholars often compare these discoveries to the rumored treasures of the Vatican, imagining what may still lie behind locked doors and silent vaults. The pursuit is as much philosophical as it is scholarly. Every historian, archivist, or curious mind must confront a fundamental question. What is the cost of knowing? What ideas were kept from public view, and why? And even when truths are uncovered, new questions inevitably arise. The archives teach that history is never complete. It is a continuous dialogue between what is remembered, what is hidden, and what is imagined. In this way, the Vatican's archives are more than a repository. They are a mirror of humanity's enduring desire to understand itself. Each scholar who walks its halls, each historian who deciphers a forgotten line, participates in a journey that began centuries ago. The hunt for truth is unending, because knowledge itself is infinite. As we leave behind these sacred shelves, the mystery remains. What has been revealed, what remains locked, and what may be lost forever. The Vatican may guard its secrets, but it also preserves the questions that drive human curiosity. And perhaps that is the greatest truth of all. History is never fully known, and wonder is never fully satisfied. The hunt continues, echoing silently through the halls of time, waiting for those who dare to seek. As we step away from the Vatican's forbidden halls, the secrets remain, locked behind doors and sealed in silence. Ancient manuscripts, lost gospels, hidden relics, and whispered truths continue to wait for eyes that may never see them. The silence is heavy, yet strangely alive, reminding us that history is not only what is revealed, but also what is hidden. Every page unopened, every scroll untouched, carries a story of power, faith, and curiosity that spans centuries. And while we may never know all that lies within, our search for truth continues. If this journey sparked your imagination, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Mysteries of Earth, and leave a comment with which secret you'd most want to uncover. Each voice helps keep these hidden histories alive. The Vatican may guard its mysteries, but together we can keep their whispers echoing through time.